Hi, this is Shauna. Before we get to today's guest, I want to take a minute to learn more about you, the listener. We've put together a short survey at fueltalent.com/podcast to gather information on who's listening and to give you a chance to make suggestions and comments about the show. I want What Fuels You to be a great resource for you and your interests, and I hope these interviews give you practical advice along with inspiration for your career and life. Help us continue to serve you better by going to fueltalent.com/podcast. Thank you so much. Now let's start today's show. Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories, the years, and successes, who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way. I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Kirill Makharinsky. Kirill is the founder and CEO of Enki, the company that helps teams with adoption of business intelligence and data tools. Previously, he co-founded Emerging Travel Group, including the brands RateHawk and ZenHotels, a profitable OTA with net annual revenues of over $100 million, and Quid, a leading research and analysis tool for strategy teams with revenues of over $50 million. In addition to his entrepreneurial ventures, he is an angel investor in Calm, AngelList, Opencare, and more. Welcome, Kirill. So good to see you.
Likewise, great to be here.
Okay, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire. You ready?
Yep, let's go for it.
I know you've done a ton of angel investing, and I'm curious, what was the very first company that you ever invested in?
Oh boy. I mean, I've taken a break from angel investing to focus on my current company. And actually, I'll give you a better answer. What's the first company I should have invested in but didn't? Because
that's a great answer. I love that.
Back in 2010, Garrett Camp is a friend of mine, and I remember there was a summit series when he literally pitched me on the app, and he was taking some angel checks from a few folks at the conference, and it was definitely not a no. It was just I was 1 month out from getting any liquidity, so I was like,
which company?
That was Uber.
Uber. Oh,
yeah.
Geez.
So it's, everyone talks about their non-portfolio but this wasn't a no. This was just I'm only getting started in a month's time because I'm waiting for this liquidity, but I should have just, taken some credit card debt or something.
Well, you just never know though. I mean, that idea, right? Get in cars with strangers. All of these ideas are always like hindsight's, of course, 2020. Okay. So what is something that you have always wanted to try, but you haven't yet?
I ask myself that question very frequently. So there's there isn't much on the list, but there was something that came up recently. There was what was it? That's right. I met someone recently who actually played lacrosse for college, and lacrosse is one of the few sports I've not played. And he's actually trying to get into the Olympics lacrosse. I'm like, I need to finally try this.
And it's a funky sport. I mean, basically, you're like hitting each other with sticks and throwing balls. It's a new one for me, but it is very fun and fast. And you'd pick it up because you're an athlete, so you'd be good. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Very much 50-50. I mean, I don't know how many people say that. Maybe it's cliche, but the way I best describe it is I'm a social introvert. So I'm love being in small groups. I'm extroverted in small groups, and I'm extroverted in general among people that I already familiar with. But large groups of strangers where there hasn't been a connection made, I was like, oh, this is not my thing.
Yeah, it can definitely be challenging. Are you into music?
I am into music. If music is, if I was forced to not work on companies and tech and building stuff, it would definitely be music and relates to music somehow. So I grew up playing the piano quite a lot. I played pretty much every day on the piano from 10 until 18 or so. So, and my family is very musical. My sister, one of my sisters, is an opera singer. And then more recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've gotten into electronic music. But specifically combining, I love combining melodies, in particular kind of classical music melodies with things like Afro house, actually. So
Like that's what you're listening to, or you're creating music?
both,
Wow.
but specifically creating combination of piano with Afro house.
Oh, you have to send it to me. I want to hear it. Is it on SoundCloud?
It is on my very private laptop, which will be unleashed onto unwilling audiences
Okay.
imminently.
I'm a willing audience. And so what was your best concert that you've been to?
Best concert, very few people might have heard of this DJ called Musik. So it's a Berlin DJ that I went to probably, this was just before the start of COVID. So that was kind of my really first eye-opening experience in terms of, let's put it this way, how technology and progressive music can be combined in really interesting ways. So that's recent. And then I think going back when I was a kid, and probably a big reason I got into classical music was and playing the piano, was I went to a concert when I was 9. It was a pianist called Freddie Kempf.
Yeah. So if you could have any superpower, which one would you choose?
I'll go slightly on a tangent here, which is whenever I do a transatlantic flight, which probably happens once or twice a month, everyone says, "Oh, you fly a lot." It was like, actually, I really enjoy it. The fact that I am offline for that length of time, and I'm actually secretly annoyed that Wi-Fi is getting better on planes. I just want to switch off from the world and just be an introvert for these 8 to 10 hours, and I just get a lot of work stuff done that's kind of really complete, not urgent, but just important and thinking long term. So I guess superpower is I wish I could just freeze time for a certain number of hours where nothing can get done and I can just focus on stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that would be amazing. Are there words, I guess maybe pick 3 that would describe your leadership style?
Bias to action, 3 words. There you go.
Is there an entrepreneur that you admire? Who do you admire the most?
Growing up in England, at the time when I was thinking of building companies, Richard Branson was the name. And so I read all his books, and he was definitely an inspirational figure just in terms of, well, I talked about leadership as being biased to action, like about his bias to action and just not being boring.
Well, he's pure magic, right? I mean, he's incredible.
Yeah.
So you started talking about growing up in the UK. I know you were born in Russia. How did your family end up in the UK?
Yeah, I was born in Moscow, and my parents met at university. Both were scientists. My dad was a physical chemist, and my mom was a mathematician. I think pretty much what happened was in the late 80s, my dad, for him, it was pretty clear what was going to happen going forward as the Soviet Union was collapsing, and the place to be in terms of opportunities and better quality of life, to be honest, was in the Western world. So yeah, I think in the late 80s, I was 4 years old. He applied for a bunch of jobs in various cities around the world. We nearly moved to Australia, ended up moving, bizarrely out of context, but to Northern Ireland for a year. So my dad got a job at DuPont, and I think their biggest research center was in Northern Ireland. And so I actually learned my English when I was 5 years old, but we were there for only a year. And then it took a year for my dad to want to become an entrepreneur himself. And so we actually moved to England because he wanted to set up his business there. And but between Ireland and England, we actually lived for a year in Malta while we were waiting for our paperwork to be able to move to the UK. So
and you have siblings? Or are you an only child?
I'm one of 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where are you in the birth order?
I'm number two. The eldest is my half brother. So we have the same dad, but so him and I moved, we were in tow as my parents left the collapsing Soviet Union, and then the other 3 were born 8, 11, and 11 years later. So, once my parents settled down and, had essentially enough money to, be not in survival mode. That's when the next phase of the family started.
The next phase of the family. And I guess, was it clear to you, I guess when you're in survival mode, it might not be clear the values as far as business and the relationship with money and capitalism and like how you kind of survive and make money. Like, what was your relationship with money like and with business as a kid, and who were you looking up to?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was if I think about values instilled by parents, I think it's not a coincidence that just so many entrepreneurs are immigrants, right? Because they have kind of this value. I'd call it, the way I'd say it is that adaptation is not a one-off thing that you experience, but it's a continuous process, right? And so, as in from the age of 4 to 10, I was exposed to this continuous adaptation, both from my parents, and as they were kind of leading by example, because that they wanted a kind of better future, and myself, right, because I had to adapt to new schools, new languages, completely new culture. And so kind of this value of adaptation being a continuous process, I think that's instilled in a lot of immigrants, specifically to money. Related to that, my dad later built a successful business, but it took time, and it wasn't until I was already older. And so when we moved to the UK, it was very much trying to survive in setting up a business, paycheck to paycheck. And as part of that, I just never really assumed, even though my parents did become wealthier later, that there is this endless pot of money. So I never really asked for money kind of proactively. So I just assumed I just have to figure it out myself.
Yeah. And what were you into? Like in middle school, high school, did you have a sense of what you'd want to be when you thought about adulting?
So at school, I remember finding school quite boring in the sense of it was just kind of a competition, and luckily I was kind of good in the subjects that could be objectively tested, the sciences basically, and so I actually found the subjective subjects most interesting. So I actually got into art quite early. I was really into art because it was subjective and there were no good answers. But given I wanted to build stuff, like the first profession I remember thinking about was being an architect. That was the first thing I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you went to Oxford, obviously an incredible school. I'm assuming that you did pretty well in high school in order to attend there. What was your experience like at Oxford? Oxford
was great. I mean, I'm slightly controversial maybe, but I think with hindsight, I would have, don't get me wrong, Oxford is probably, one of, if not the top college brands in the world. I had an amazing experience. My best friends all went to Oxford, built an amazing network, and it gave me a lot of the opportunities that I had. So, maybe take this with a grain of salt, but with hindsight, I probably would have gone to the US for college, even if it wasn't a top brand school, just purely just thinking about what I'm doing now and kind of how intertwined everything I'm doing is with the US. And I'm a big fan, though, of certainly at this time, kids having somewhat of a cocoon and being protected somewhat until about 13 or 14, which I think the UK is the best in the world for. But after that, I think if you want to be building things, get involved with business, probably getting exposed to the US was a good thing. So I mean, at Oxford, I realized after 2 months that I wasn't good enough to be a mathematician. Thank God. Before I started, I thought, okay, maybe I was, a lot of the books I was reading were kind of more abstract math books, partially because they helped me get into Oxford, but also just because I just found them just interesting from a philosophical point of view and potentially as something I'd want to do professionally. But then 2 months in, I realized, okay, I'm not going to be, one of the top 5 people in the world who are working on this. So pretty quickly, thank God, realized, okay, what else could I be, right? Started to explore startups and building things, and that's kind of how I got involved with the Entrepreneurship Club at Oxford, which I helped start.
Yeah. Tell me more about the Entrepreneurship Club that you started.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, it was my way of just learning, to be honest, right? So I wanted to get involved with startups. I reached out. I didn't know where to start. There weren't really any resources online back then, unlike now. And so I just reached out to a bunch of people that were in that network, or like physically close to me in Oxford and London, who might be able to help. And back then, there wasn't really a startup scene in Europe or the UK at all. And so no one really knew what they were doing either, right? And so, but I realized there were a lot of people in my boat, as in they were interested. And so initially just started something as a kind of Friday night. So I set up just a drinking event with what initially was, I think, 15 people who I talked to and found after a few weeks, who were also interested in startups but didn't know what they were doing. And from there, we thought, oh, how can we actually do something more than just talk about stuff? And so we had this idea of setting something up a bit more formal, which we ended up registering as a formal charity and club as part of the university. And and through that process ended up becoming the second biggest society after the Oxford Union in the university. But more practically, we basically hosted events. Yes, we had speakers. So in particular, for example, Max Levchin was one of our speakers, and he was the way I got my first job in San Francisco at Slide. But the kind of more practical use was we actually set up workshops to start companies, right? So we literally in year one, we would have 40 people in a circle and who were kind of curious about something. Like maybe only 5 of us had any ideas that the rest of the group thought had any kind of that we're excited about in any way. And we literally started 5 companies that day.
That's incredible. It's like the original startup weekend, or the original like the labs, like the VC labs that are spinning out companies now.
Yeah, that's right.
That's super cool. So tell me, so this company Slide, what did that company do? And when you say you met him, and then so you went from London to San Francisco?
That's right. I did 3 years at Oxford, but literally 5 days after my last exam, I flew over to San Francisco. And actually, initially, it started as an internship. So I actually had a job lined up. I think it was my first job, my first proper full-time job was supposed to be a startup private equity fund, which I was excited about. But and so Slide was actually just an internship. But I thought, hey, I've got nothing to lose. I'll explore San Francisco, which I'd never been to before. This will be great experience, but I definitely was planning to come back after 2 months. Mm-hmm. And so Slide was Zynga's main competitor. So we were one of the biggest Facebook app making companies. But before we started making Facebook apps, we had a slideshow product. And while I was there during my internship, we basically found product market fit and started growing like crazy. And so, and also while I was there, I mean, we had an absolute stellar team. So it was some of the top folks from PayPal and eBay and Yahoo who were part of the founding team. And so I was there for a couple months, and it was quite jarring early on, just getting used to the culture. But it was just incredible exposure to to the way the Valley worked, which is like completely different to anything I had experienced before. Yeah. What was happening in Europe back then. And so I was like, I have to stay.
just the pace. It got you got a little taste of it, and then you had to stay. Well, and then just like reading your background, and then it's like founder. Then you got the serious bug of entrepreneurship and founded a bunch of companies. Tell me about that journey of being an entrepreneur for the next, from forever, since 2007, you've been a founder.
For me, it was quite a kind of more of a career progression. So my first company that I was co-founder of was initially called Unoodle, but it rebranded to Quid, a company called Quid, which merged with NetBase a couple of years ago. It's doing quite well, but I was before we had any investment, I think I had 20% of all the shares, right? And so I was an equal partner with my co-founder in that company, who's actually still at the company.
Wow.
So 15 years on. In big part, I mean, I helped him get it off the ground. We spent countless weekends before we raised some money and shifted to full time. But we spent countless weekends in Washington Park, in North Beach, just writing, building specs and.
What did Unoodle do? What was the business idea for Unoodle?
So we raised money. The first idea was completely different to what Quid does. When Unoodle rebranded to Quid, we actually spun out Unoodle as a separate brand. So that brand still exists, and now they do business plan competitions. But the initial idea was very, very different, which was we actually started building a social network for entrepreneurs at universities. So think of it like an AngelList, but for university ecosystems. And there was no real business model apart from, hey, if we manage to engage the top university entrepreneurs, the future PayPals and YouTubes and Googles and Yahoos of the world, which got started in universities, they're going to be on this network, and we're going to figure out how to get a piece of them, right? So that was the initial idea, is just a kind of really compelling online tool. And that idea stemmed from the Entrepreneurship Club, right? Because the guy who I started Unoodle, which became Quid, with, his name is Bob Goodson. He was kind of involved in starting the Entrepreneurship Club at Oxford with me. And so kind of the idea stemmed from that, because we just saw a lot of student entrepreneurs that we were helping, but we didn't have any software to really allow them to interact with each other and do what they did with our help, which is kind of start companies in a more effective way, right? So that was the initial idea, but it kind of evolved very quickly.
Yeah, interesting. So going through that as a first-time founder, it's obviously a success. How come you ended up leaving and your founder stayed?
Well, the company hasn't exited yet, so it's doing very well. It was raised kind of over $100 million, merged with NetBase, which is very, very successful. So it was, after 4 years, it felt like it was time to start what I felt like was my own company, right? So I actually moved on after 4 years, and it was very good terms with my co-founder. It just felt the right timing to start what ended up being my previous company, which I worked on full time, which is a hotel booking company. So that was when I moved from Quid and started my next company. So there I was a 50-50 co-founder, but I wasn't the CEO, right? And so at Enki now, I'm the CEO of the company. It's definitely felt like a progression.
What would you say, Kirill, is your kind of ninja skill? Like when you're not the CEO, because your titles have been a little bit more like co-founder, president, but like, are you an operator? Are you more of a marketing guy, sales guy? Are you more of an engineering? Like, what's your kind of special sauce as a leader?
I'm on the product side, so I'm very much about, and maybe my past with music, and remember I told you that story about kind of Freddie Camp and creating this magic experience and being absolutely mind blown by it. So I just, when I'm doing anything, I'm like, how can I recreate that? How can I recreate that for everyone I'm serving? So yeah, if I had to put it in kind of one phrase, it would be just on the product side. I just love thinking like, okay, those people are going to be experiencing what I'm building right now. How can I make it as mind blowing as possible? And so I'm just kind of naturally drawn to the product side, and because of my kind of art side, which from my childhood, I just love being involved in kind of the visual elements of that as well.
Yeah. And what happened with the travel company?
The travel company is also still growing. That was one hell of a story for lots of reasons. One was because it started as I actually moved back for 5 years to Moscow, and the initial idea was a booking.com for the Russian-speaking world. We had to kind of go all out in terms of focusing on the international market, and we switched to B2B, and so that transition was pretty crazy. Also involved China. Like we were, one interesting story is that we were supposed to raise a huge round from around the same time from C-Trip, which is China's biggest travel agent. And that literally fell apart on the last, they literally got cold feet on signing and wiring day. And, we had no money. Somehow we miraculously survived and raised $4 million in a weekend and had to get through that. And then, rebuilt the company. And then COVID happened and our revenues went down by 96%. And again, somehow survived. Again, the company's doing very, very well. And, in terms of, hopefully will be an IPO on the card soon.
What does the company do now? I know you said it started to be like the booking for Russians, but what is it? What does it do now?
So it has a few brands, right? The valuable technology that it built was a white label meta search that basically found the best rates for hotels on random local sites, and then would basically show the best prices. And in most cases, the prices are better than on Booking.com, right? So that was the initial technology we built. It's like, there are tons of sites like cheaphotelsinbarcelona.com, right? Which are, let's put it this way, not the most beautiful websites, right? And so they're tough to navigate and they don't know how to kind of acquire customers very effectively, but they have amazing rates because they just talk to the hotels directly, right? Most of the time better than Booking.com. And so we basically built technology to combine all of those. We have the most kind of partners and kind of the best rates. So that initially we just focused on the consumer market. Initially, like I said, in the Russian speaking world, Booking.com is a very, very tough competitor. So we switched more of our focus to B2B. The consumer side is still a pretty good business, but the B2B side, which is basically selling to travel agents and corporates, is much more effective, right? So the kind of the best business right now as part of that kind of group of companies is called RateHawk, RateHawk.com. And it's essentially a product with the same technology that we sell to travel agents. So it's the top product for travel agents to sell to their customers, to use when selling trips to their customers.
Oh, I'm sure it's probably, like you said, just on fire now, but incredible that you survived through the pandemic. What a crazy industry to be in. So it looks like you've done a ton of investing. I counted, I was like 15 plus investments as an angel investor. I know you've kind of slowed that down while you're building Enki. How has it been for you as an operator? I guess you've seen now both sides. You've been an investor. What lens do you look at when you're thinking about which companies to invest in? Are you looking at the total addressable market, the industry? Are you doing the data analysis on the numbers? Are you just looking at the leadership team? What are you looking at? And then also when you're going to raise, or maybe you haven't had to raise, how do you pitch differently because you're used to being on the other side?
Being an angel investor is completely different to being what I'd call a professional institutional investor, right? So someone who is an investor at a VC firm is, just the process they go through and is just completely different to an individual investor, right? And so I've got no experience of being a professional institutional investor. Yeah, to answer your question, for me, actually, I think it's probably worth mentioning how I got started with angel investment. I mentioned how I did not invest to Uber, which was kind of a month before I got liquidity, but I don't think it was a coincidence that I started investing when I left the Valley, because my main motivation was to actually learn and stay in touch with the Valley because I just left the Valley, right? And so my main motivator was, to be honest, be able to read all the updates that are sent, were sent from all my investments and being close touch with the best practices in the Valley, because I wanted to stay exposed to that. And I thought, okay, what's the best way of doing that? I might as well invest into my smartest friends that are building things at that time. And because I wanted to learn as much as possible, I want to invest into ideas that are kind of different to what I'd find as normal or that I'd understand, right? Yeah. And so that was the framework. It's just like smart folks in the Valley building on things that I didn't understand. So this is like completely, probably terrible investment advice, but it turned out to be a pretty great framework for investing. So I don't know if it was the first company, but was one of the first investors in Calm, the meditation app, which is now turning into this full-blown kind of next generation.
I love Calm.
And then Peak, the travel activities marketplace that's run by Rizwana Bashir. In the case of Calm, I invested when Calm was donothingfor2minutes.com or whatever the website was. It was like literally
do nothing for 2 minutes. That's awesome.
Yeah, and and pretty much everyone else who was looking at it thought, oh, this must be a joke, right? And so I thought, well, as long as the founders are sincere and about focusing on this full time and in a way where the vision is something that can really create something new and valuable, I'm happy to be part of that.
Yeah. And so did you have to raise for Enki? And if so, or did you bootstrap?
Both, but I'd say half of the capital that we've raised so far. I haven't actually announced kind of how much we've raised and from who exactly. But about half the capital has been my own, and then the rest from relatively small checks, so kind of up to 250K from individuals or institutional investors.
Yeah. And what does the company do?
So what we're doing is we're helping scale professional mentorship. So our mission is to get every professional to have a mentor that's helping them fulfill their potential in their professional life, right? The reason I'm excited about this is because the kind of the highest impact I've been lucky to have was when mentors of mine. I've had many mentors who've helped me along the way, and kind of those were kind of critical inflection points in my career, right? It's tough to find the person who is a good fit for kind of the skills that will move you forward in the career over the next year or two. That's really, really hard. And so what we've done is solve that problem, which is how do you kind of connect folks who are willing to and able to offer a specific skill set as a mentor to someone for whom it will make a big difference in their career over the next year or two. And so we're building basically a kind of a mentorship platform. We're distributing through companies. We help them use their productivity tools much more effectively. And the way this ties with mentorship is that we mentor employees specifically in skills that are going to help them be more productive and use their productivity tools better, right? So we're building this marketplace of mentors, but the companies are really, really behind this and pushing it, right? Because it helps them improve a ton of metrics around productivity, helps them adopt their tools better, helps them save time, helps them automate a lot of things, right?
How many users do you need per company? Is it need to be a certain size company?
Our company packages start a minimum of kind of 20 people at a time, and but we any individual can kind of join the platform and kind of start on one of our tracks and get mentorship, along whatever tracks are relevant for them.
Mm-hmm. And so to measure the milestones of success within the company, you're measuring it by the amount of companies that are on the platform.
Well, I mean, success for us is, are we helping to achieve their employees' goals, right? And kind of we provide that infrastructure to make sure that we identify what are the goals for each employee, and they do a showcase at the end of each month to show this is how they've achieved those goals and what are the objective benefits to the company. So there's value to the company, right? Mm-hmm. The big problem with all these mentorship companies that are kind of focused on soft skills exclusively, like the Better Ups and the Coach Ups of this world, which are great companies and products, but there isn't an objective tied to the bottom line. There is an objective
to outcomes. There
is an objective link to, okay, this is great. This clearly is a benefit for you as an employee, but this is quite expensive. How do we know that this is kind of objectively a massive boost in terms of not just for the employee, but for the company?
Right. So can you give me a real example? I'm thinking about it in terms of like me, my company, for example. Give me an example of a customer, a problem that they had, and how Enki was able to solve it, and how like literally logistically it works. Like they get on the platform and then you match them up with a mentor. Is that like how the matching works, what algorithm you're using, what assessment tools you use, all of that?
Yeah, so what we focus on is what are use cases that save time and automate things, right? So the simple example of that is, I think most companies, most professionals use Excel. And so, the kind of simplest example is we would take, for example, let's say a customer success team, right? As one example. And, customer success do various things in Excel to help prepare data for their customers, right? So it turns out they're wasting a ton of time manipulating Excel and collecting data to prepare data that they need for their customers, right? So that they can provide them with useful information and to help sell them and serve them better. So very simple example is we would have 10 people from a large company, let's say in customer success, that would be on the platform. They would be on in this case, Excel track, and the platform automatically, with the help of the mentor, defines what is the goal in month one. And then once they finish month one, month two, and at the end of month one, there's a showcase to show, okay, this is how much time I'm saving in collecting data on my customers. Therefore, this is how much time I'm saving. And these are the new things I'm able to do because of this new time, because this time has been saved, right? So that's a very, very simple example. We started life in training in kind of business intelligence tools. So there are tons of these tools like Tableau, Looker, Power BI that are absolutely great. And again, customer success teams and marketing teams and product teams can and should use them. The problem is that they're pretty hard to get started with, right? So what happens in especially larger companies is that you might have 1,000 people who can have access to Looker, but only a very small number of them will actually be using them properly, right? And so another example is that we would have, let's say, a marketing team who they're just not using Looker to their potential. And it turns out that if you use Looker for a lot of marketing examples, it saves you a ton of time. It's not just kind of a nice to have. It saves you a ton of time because you don't need to do as much stuff in Excel that you were doing really, really slowly before, right? And so we focus on kind of the objective time savings from getting a large marketing team to use Looker instead of Excel for certain use cases. So that's another example, right?
Interesting. And so when you say who's the person that's like working with the team? It's like one of your mentors, an Enki mentor?
Well, we have an operations team, which is basically a customer success team that kind of onboards companies and makes sure the platform is set up for them. We have got kind of algorithms that automatically match kind of those. Let's say there's 50 marketing people, we match them with the mentors that are in our network for them, but our kind of customer success team, they do some tweaking to make sure that everyone's matched appropriatly, right? So it's like a human
sounds
loop.
Super cool.
Well,
Awesome.
it's cool because companies are already doing this right now, right? So it's like, but it's incredibly, like, a lot of this stuff is difficult and manual, and there's a people component, and the larger the company gets, the more of a people problem and politics issue there is. Now COVID's happened, everyone is remote. Now kind of how, solving the problem of how do you get a large marketing team or sales team or product team to use our tools that we have, especially when they're joining the company, that's gone from just being difficult to a crisis, right? It's really, really hard. It's like, how do you do that remotely? The way you do it remotely, if you do it properly, is that you set up like proper processes and that are kind of systematic, disciplined, driven by software, reminding everyone to join them, where every employee is matched with someone internally who's their mentor. This is how Airbnb and Google do it, right? what we've in effect created is built a system that allows every company to kind of get the benefits of the 3 or 4 companies that are doing this somewhat well, which are Google, Airbnb, Amazon, and a couple of others, right? Except for we do it better because we have access to a kind of larger network of mentors, right?
I can't wait. I can't wait to tinker around on it and see if we could use it, because I'm thinking of all sorts of examples of ways that we could use it. How have you been intentional around, and obviously I know you started it about a year before the pandemic started, a little longer than a year, and then went into a pandemic. Like,
Yeah.
how have you built your culture? How many employees do you have at this point?
We started the company in a distributed first kind of way, right? I'm part of the phrase distributed first rather than the remote first, because I think distributed is kind of word-wise aligns with more of the fact that the team's together and not just kind of, far away from each other. And, there's obvious huge benefits, especially for startups, of being in the same place. It's the whiteboarding,
Yes.
it's ideating, it's the, how do you both minimize downsides of that being much harder, but also use remote or being distributed as an opportunity to maximize the benefits of that, right? Which is essentially access to a global talent pool, right? Which is the biggest thing. But what was the initial question? Building the culture?
How have you been intentional? Like, what's your idea of a good culture, and how have you set a culture as far as having it reflect your own personal values of the kind of the place that you'd want to work?
I think the way I think about it is like, how do you scale those family values when you have a very strong family, and how do you scale that in terms of the benefits of collaboration, 100% trust, communicating in a way that where you're fully intentional about just caring for others. How do you scale that, right? And in my previous company, the hotel booking company, we made a lot of mistakes, just like everyone does. But one big thing is, one thing we saw is we far too quickly kind of grew past the kind of 150 to 200 person mark, which is that Dunbar number of 150. I think it's there are a lot of applications of it. One of them is that once you get a company to that stage, a lot of things start breaking down. I think it's a inflection point of things communication wise and process wise starting to break down. And I think we grew from like 20 to 200 people in 18 months. It was.
How many do you have at Enki now?
So we have full time. We have 15, only 15. I am trying, with my hardest to grow the team as slowly and deliberately as possible. I mean, we're still relatively early in the grand scheme of things, but we do have our network of mentors who are very part time. So our model of the mentors is unlike the kind of soft skill experts that kind of Coach Hub and others hire. Ours are very part time. So they work full time at top companies in the US, and they spend between 1 and 4 hours on our platform mentoring, right? And so we have a network of at this point 300 mentors. And so obviously they're not full time the team, but we see them as an extension of the team in some ways.
So if somebody's interested, if they're listening and they want to be a mentor, or they think that they need a mentor, I guess they could reach out to Enki for either to be a mentor. If they want a mentor, they should tell their company to go sign up, that they need the tools that Enki can provide. And if they want to be a mentor on the platform, is there a way to do that through the website? Yeah,
there's a way to sign up as a mentor as well. What's really interesting is that we speak to a lot of our mentors frequently, and it is a paid opportunity, so we do pay our mentors, but it's reason number 4 or 5 in when we talk to them afterwards of what value they're getting, or what's in it for them. The best way to learn is to teach, right? And so by you being forced to guide and teach others, it's a great forcing function to just figure out where your own gaps are as well.
Yeah. Well, this is great, Kirill. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you one final question, and that is, what fuels you? Oh, it's just life itself. It's just life itself, Shauna. So
I think this is a lesson I took from my dad, where he's like, too many people philosophize too much about what the meaning of life is. It's just life itself. And so, it's the reason why whatever I'm building, I want to make it as magical of an experience as possible for whoever's experiencing it. And I want to have the most interesting experiences myself over time. We haven't talked as much about crazy, interesting experiences, but that's I think that should be a big component of everyone's life. So, what fuels me is
completely agree.
The next great experience, both for myself and for folks that I'm building stuff for.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.